Hey, you guys, I want to talk about ghost towns. I've been seeing a lot of that lately, and I've been here and in Montgomery for about a year, and there's several, dilapidated, abandoned buildings, but it's nothing like I've seen in other towns. I have seen driven through some towns that is completely ghost towns, and I'm wondering, where do the people go? Where do people go that they just like up and leave their town? So I don't think that I don't think that it happens as gradually. I think it happens more suddenly because the buildings, the businesses that are left behind are pretty much all the same as far as abandonment level, or the same level of the same age, the same level of activity or lack of it. So I just ask myself, where do the people go? So they obviously aren't having enough business, so they just have no choice but to leave the town to survive. So when Alexander and I were in moving transition, because we couldn't find work, I couldn't find work in Mobile, it's like, you know what I mean? It's just weird that people couldn't understand that I was in this predicament and that I needed to leave unless I was going to have something substantial. So that's creepy in itself. People need to understand that if there's no work in a town, how are you going to leave your son if DHR gets involved? You just can't leave your son behind. So that's creepy in itself. I mean, I've been talking about it for a long time. How the bus stops in Mobile didn't have any benches or cover. The same thing here in Montgomery, because that's just the way a lot of bus stops throughout the South are. They don't have any benches or covers. And to me, that's not fair for the people who support the transportation industry, the public transportation. It's not fair. It's almost like going to a DMV or going to the health department or going to, any other public government building, and for you to have nowhere to sit. It just it, and it's, when you're paying for transportation, you're the one supporting that industry, right? The the people. So to me, it's like, give back. Give back to the people that contribute to this industry. That's the least that you can do. So I've been seeing ghost towns, throughout the years as as I have traveled. And to me, it's creepy because it's not fascinating. It's not fascinating in the least. Because this is what depresses the youth. And I know that some kids find it fascinating, like, oh yeah, this is kind of like apocalyptic, kind of creepy, because kids like creepy stuff. You know they do. What kind of a message and what kind of a future are these kids going to have with these kind of towns run down in ghost towns? It's not right. What are America's cities doing with the people's money? This is the question. So people have to pay taxes, state and federal. Why can't the states and our federal government give back to the people what they're taking? Because if you neglect that town that's now a ghost or dilapidated, run down, and will be ghost here soon, it's like you're going to go on to the next town, and the next town, and the next town, and that same mentality. The city officials are supposed to be taking care of these things, folks. They need to address these things to the people in the towns and say, look, we need to beautify our town. We need to keep it pretty. Now, Montgomery's very pretty. Montgomery's pretty. It does have a few dilapidated buildings, but I've seen worse. I've seen worse. And it's all over the place. It's in my country and everybody's country, right? But the point I'm trying to make is, if we're doing this here on Earth, what makes anybody think that we're going to be any better in another planet? You know that there are, and this has been fascinating news to me, because I've known about this for a few years now, and it's about China's buildings that are unoccupied. There are many buildings in entire cities in China that have built and continue to build, but that buildings that are not occupied are neglected because nobody is running them. So these buildings are falling apart, and nobody's buying them. They were just built just for the sake of it. That's taking money away from the people. The government is using the people's taxes to pay these projects that go, I don't want to say nowhere, but they just sit there, and they're built for the sake of it. It just doesn't make sense to chop off the trees. It doesn't make sense to undo God's work just to build something for the sake of it without any reasons, without any justification. We have to build. Building is good, but we have to restore what we have damaged. We have to restore what we have neglected first. So you either demolish it and then you build new, or you something. But we just can't be building just to let it sit there and be neglected. And China is a very large country with a lot of people. You have a lot of people in China. And then they have the um, environmental issues, not just with air pollution, but water pollution, and a lot of other things that are not up to standard. And this is a leading nation. And I don't have a problem with Chinese people at all. I think Chinese people are very intelligent. But we need to consider how busy we are and why. Just building things like building newer and newer and newer and newer computers, or newer and newer and newer technology and phones, we have to consider the consequences of that, because people are upgrading, and the gadgets are polluting our planet. I can't stand a bunch of cables. That is an unsightly thing. And, I had a very simple lifestyle with plenty of natural light. I lived inexpensively with very little. I mean, I used to go to just Hobby Lobby, Kirkland's, and TJ Maxx, and, places like that, and Hobby Lobby, and, just get the things that I needed to have everything organized. To me, organization, simplicity, and cleanliness has always been my standard since my youth. And it's difficult when you have to live with other people who don't, you know, understand that that's what you are and that's what you do, and that you need to have your child with you. You know that your child is your family. That's why I came to Montgomery. So that I could speak, so that I could write, so that I could work. But I was being denied jobs other than that one serving job right before the corona. And in that industry, you only make $3 an hour plus tips. And I've been to Mexican restaurants. I've seen how slow they can be. For a waitress, for half the tables, folks, this is ridiculous. We need to make more money in that industry. People need to make more money as a server to start with, as a base pay. We know that. Because your tips are good when you work in a restaurant that's busy. See, back in the days, they used to have restaurants like Ruby Tuesday at the mall, and it was so packed. The malls were so packed during the holidays. Nowadays, you don't see that many people out in the malls. You really don't. There's a lot of shops that have shut down. Almost all the restaurants have shut down. The places in the middle of the mall, in the hallway, the 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 restaurant places have shut down. Just a few kiosks remain in Mobile. Here in Montgomery, there's some malls that are just completely dilapidated, just nothing going on, no activity whatsoever. Schools. that are not the buildings just sitting there, restaurants, the buildings are just sitting there. And I asked an architect the other day, I said, well, so what does the city do with a building like that? And he said, well, the city can't do anything about it because, the people who owned it continue to pay taxes on it or whatever, and that's just the way it is. And it's like, to me, there needs to be a solution to that. And I'm not an architect, I'm not a builder, I'm not an engineer. I've never claimed to be, but we need to start thinking like social engineers, all of us. What are we going to inherit? And what are we handing down to our future generation? If we don't do anything about it, we're just going to continue to let everything be run down. We do that to one another as people too. So I have always believed, since I was old enough to think about it, that we need more bistros and cafes and cyber cafes and those type of places in the downtown areas. Not only to bring more business in, but to also beautify. We don't need to be necessarily doing what China's done, that they have replicated, you know, different complete, structures and towns from Europe and America over there in China. Like they have a replica of the Eiffel Tower, they have a replica of, the London Tower, and, you know, these different replicas, but, some towns look very European. And to me, I mean, to each his own, but to me, we need to we need to work with what we've got. Work with what we've got. You know what I mean? So here in America, because we have such a mixed culture, it's like we there's a lot of Europeans, and there's a lot of natives, and there's a lot of black Afro Americans, and a lot of Latinos. So in here, pretty much anything can go, and it's totally acceptable because America is so diverse. But I do believe that the more bistros, the more cafes, the more um, cyber cafes and those kind of places that you have that are outdoors, that have outdoors, not only does it beautify the city, but it also, makes it more happy for people to hang out, enjoy the moonlight, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy coffee and wine, and have the pets running in the in the garden area, and the children playing. To me, that's so beautiful. We used to have places like that in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. I mean, there were a few, and then they kind of revamped the downtown area, and it really helped tremendously. They started having these little, really unique restaurants with a unique theme. Each one was different from the other. Everybody had their own personality. It wasn't like they were all trying to, copy one another. No, each store in each restaurant or cafe was its own little world, and it was really lively.
And it is, I'm sure, still today. And there's some historical places that they've tried to maintain because it takes effort. You just have to love what you're in, love what you do. They have a place in downtown Ocean Springs called Tater Nut, and it's like they have the best donut ever that I've ever tried. And it's just very unique. They have a very unique recipe because they put potato flour in it, and they have really good selection of pastries that are unique to this particular shop. So everybody's doing a very unique thing, right? And it's very lively. I mean, they had the very first smoke-free bar in downtown Ocean Springs, and it was so refreshing to walk into and it was an upper scale, but it was very casual, and the whole ambiance was refreshing, very unique to the South, but it was also very casual and at the same time upper scale. All of that in one. So anybody could walk into this bar and enjoy, good company and good everything, and just have a clean, breathable environment. And that's what we need, we need more of that stuff. Well, I mean, that was back then, but we needed more of that stuff, you know. But you have to want it, you know? You have to want it. So here in Montgomery, it's beautiful. I've seen some beautiful places and people are very friendly. People in Montgomery are friendly and welcoming. I cannot deny that. And I don't feel by any means ever threatened out there in the street at night when I go to walk the dog. I mean, a few cars do drive fast in the neighborhood when it's late at night because they're not expecting children, I suppose. But, that's the worst. And, everywhere you go, you're going to have, gunshots at some point. Everywhere you go, you're going to have, the ambulance and the police. I mean, that's everywhere in the world. Some places more than others. But here in Montgomery, I would say it's pretty mellow. And where I'm at. And it's beautiful, but there are some places that are dilapidated, but that's everywhere. And it's like, well, what does the city do with stuff like that? You know, to me, there needs to be a solution because we cannot have these kind of buildings just sitting there vacant without any caregiver. You know, just like children should not be picked up by DHR based on allegations and all of this money and effort just to keep mother and child separated, just to have the child neglected and the mother frustrated. This is a war against the family unit. And the family unit is the most important unit. So I do believe that the youth, instead of inheriting ghost towns and vacant buildings that are just right down spooky, I mean, this stuff is right down dangerous. If you think about the environment within these buildings, the mold growing, and all kinds of bugs and all kinds of stale air, that's not healthy for our lungs or our skin or anything or our sight. It is neglect and it's not of God. It is a clear indication that God is needed in this particular town or situation. There are a lot of ghost towns throughout the world, throughout the earth, and this is where God's light needs to shine and come in and clean house. Do you understand, folks? We cannot continue to neglect like this. Everywhere I go, you're going to see a particular area in town that's obviously worse than others. It just depends on which side of town, but every city has this issue with trash in the streets. Everywhere you go, especially in Latin America and in places here in the United States. I've seen some places that are pretty neglected. And the city has gotten to the point where they don't know what to do because they feel that the signs won't help, because too many signs look busy and trashy and people don't read them, obviously, because if people bother to read things, then they wouldn't throw trash in the street. This is my solution to that. The mayor and associates need to come out, drive around more often, and take a look at the situation, speak to the neighbors, find out what the people need, find out what the people want, find out why, when, all kinds of things. Talk to your people. Make a note. Get back to your offices and speak among you, the associates, the city officials, and have everybody brainstorm what to do. Because that situation will ultimately hurt the entire city and the city officials, because when you don't have business running, or when you have dilapidated buildings, it's gonna run people away. It's not inviting. So people are not going to want to do business in a town like that. People are not going to want to linger. And the real estate hurts. The businesses hurt. There goes your taxpayers' money. Do you see? So we have to speak to the people. We also need more diversity among us in the cities, because, and I'm not being racist in the least, but there are some even black Afro-Americans who will have brought it up to my attention. They'll say, well, I don't like black neighborhoods. That's why I don't want my kids going to certain school. And it's like, people are being prejudiced against their own people. So for this reason, I do believe that we need more diversity within the school systems, so that there's more fairness among the schools for the students' benefit. We cannot have these dilapidated buildings. There needs to be a solution. And I do believe that the solution is to tear down the building and sell or rent the space, but only build another structure if one is needed. If none is needed, then tear down the building if it's not something that can be repurposed, and grow some trees. For the love of God in Jesus. Because that was what was there to begin with. And we're just tearing it down to build and build and build. Like what's happening in China. And what has been happening in China has been happening for a long time. I guess they were expecting their real estate to pick up, and they were expecting to attract people, but you've got to have a plan. You know who and why and when were people going to move and occupy these buildings in China. You see. And another thing is, I have to think, is the pollution in China. Who wants to live in a beautiful home if the air is going to kill you? Do you see, folks? First things first, we've got to take care of the quality of the air if we're going to continue to build for the sake of it. And by chopping down the trees, you're certainly not going to expedite the cleanup process. I mean, I know I'm speaking to myself because I like to speak. And I know that, I know that I am a middle-aged woman, but that's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed that I'm not 27. Believe in me, I don't ever want to be 27 again. It was a very painful time in my life because I was trying to move forward and these people kinked my wheels. So I understand, women who are oppressed in other parts of the world, because we're doing it here in America too. Among the churches too. Among women. Among neighbors. And I'm not saying here in Montgomery, no. I'm talking about Mississippi and Mobile. Because it's not right to be studying somebody and expect that person to just sit there and not be able to do anything about it. Believe in me, I have applied for jobs and I have been denied. I wanted to speak to the mayor in Mobile, and I didn't get to sit down to speak to the mayor. I didn't get to speak to the staff members, but the secretary. I got to speak to a couple of staff members, but they were making it abundantly clear that they wanted me to conclude and leave. And I was bringing up to the attention of the staff, and it was just 2 people there that I'm aware of. Maybe the meeting was recorded and then they were observing me from their private offices. But I've never threatened anyone. What I brought up to their attention was that we needed to create more jobs for the local people, and that we needed, bus stops and benches, benched and covered bus stops throughout the city. And in writing, I had brought up that we needed child theft prevention in the cities, in the city. And I brought up in writing that, let's see what else I brought up. I believe that was it. I believe those were the issues that I had brought up. And I believe that when I said child theft prevention, that raised a flag, well, okay. See, I'm a parent. I don't trust any of you with my son. I don't trust anyone with my son. We should only fear and trust God 100% only. Because we're living in those kind of days where children will say, years later, I was molested, I was raped, why does this happen all the time? Why? So if we know that these things happen, why do we continue to leave our kids with strangers? This is why Alexander was picked up, because I was not wanting to take a job as a housekeeper at night and on weekends, because they know my qualifications. They know that I have bilingual skills. They know that I have computer skills. They know that I have management skills. They know that I have medical skills and that I've served in the Air Force. I was honorably discharged, that I was a clinic manager. They know that. I have a good phone etiquette. I answer the phone almost always by the third ring when it's a working, like at work, when I'm at work. Not necessarily my private phone, but at work I try to answer it by the third ring. I always state my name. I state the name of the business. I'm very good with taking notes and taking messages. I'm very meticulous. I'm a dedicated, meticulous worker. I am not claiming to be the best or the fastest. I'm 47, not 27. But when I was 27 and I was looking for work, I was being denied as well. All of these things are done to basically exploit women for their purposes. They figure, well, somebody's going to be broke, they're going to need money to pay bills, and they're going to have to... There are men who will speak like that. You know, there are men, and there are far more men who speak like this. And even women. Oh, well, she's going to have to reciprocate, you know, in order to get the assistance. Believe in me, we live in this kind of world. I'm 47 and I'm not 27 or 17. I know that. But my mind refuses to accept that mentality. I find it horrific. How our nation can allow everybody and their brother in these home invasions is beyond my comprehension. Should not be. Private citizens should be protected by our government as citizens of that nation. Oh, she my penny. You see my penny. Oh, my sweetie. She my penny. Hello, hello. So I've got to go and take her to the other room. But we'll talk later.